coming back to what I was saying earlier, so Donald Trump, basically in the middle of all the chaos and mayhem and frenzy, when his buddies were invading and trying to occupy the parliament and the highest office of the US government, he comes up on Twitter and he says that go home, be peaceful, be kind, and in spite of all the election fraud and all the bad things that have happened to him and his campaign, he does not want any violence, he does not want any conflict, he does not want any bloodshed. And this video at the moment that Donald Trump did on Twitter account is now taken off the Twitter account. And he also has 21 hours, I would say 24 hours ago, tweeted that he does not want any violence or any kind of, riots. And this is already showing on his Twitter account. And the next thing you know is that his Twitter account is all blocked. This video is not showing. And he's portrayed as a volatile terrorist, fascist, extremist, militant kind of a personality by the Democrats. What is this? This is a drama. If any party has done coups all over the world more than anyone else, it is the Democratic Party. This is how they invade, this is how they occupy, this is how they wage their wars. If you look at the history of the Democratic Party, it is always a CIA orchestrated coup of various countries of the world by the US under their governance. And this thing that happened in Capitol Hill was not a coup done by Donald Trump, as proven by his video, which he did in the middle of everything, where he was telling the protesters to go home. It was a coup done by George Soros that is pulling the strings of the Democratic Party. And this is the simple thing that I'm trying to tell all Americans. This is the simple thing that I'm trying to tell the rest of the world, that you have to see behind the curtain. You have to see behind the canvas of what they're telling you on the mainstream media and what they're even telling you on the social media. You have to look at what is the motive. You have to look at what is the agenda. Soros is fed up of Donald Trump. One of the biggest reasons why he's fed up is because all those Blackwater military contractors who were given full autonomy to create a mayhem and to create chaos all over Middle East, they are now paralyzed. They remain paralyzed throughout the tenure of Donald Trump. And so this was a big deal for Soros, who wants to create the greater Israel, who wants to have a huge empire of Israel all over the world, where he can pronounce victory over various territories at the cost of US Marines' lives, at the cost of US economy, at the cost of little children like Alian. And so all this agenda will not happen with peace-loving Americans who fight for their constitution, who fight for democracy, who do not want any more wars, who are fed up of the military-industrial complex. So they have to create ways for the American people to be able to digest the bitter pill of war, the bitter pill of conflict. They have to create an excuse to invade other countries. They have to create and justify a drama for you to be able to agree that, yes, go ahead and do it. And what they did at the Capitol Hill was another such drama. They created fear. They created an urge for you to say, oh no, this is too much. We can't do this. We can't have a leader like Donald Trump anymore in this house because of what happened at the Capitol Hill by his protesters. All while he's telling them, go home, be peaceful, we stand for law and order. I mean, seriously, you're not seeing this. I can see it, even though I have been the biggest critique of Donald Trump all my life. I have criticized him, I've campaigned against him, I have actually fought for the Biden campaign at the height, peak of the elections, supporting him against Donald Trump in the name of human rights violations that Trump did against the Hispanics and against the Black Americans. I am telling you this. This is not just that, oh, Trump is now, he is really bad and he's a fascist and he is doing really violent stuff and he's promoting terrorism. A woman was killed in amongst these protesters, and she was killed by the cops. And she belonged to the Air Force. She was an Air Force veteran, and she got killed. And she was not carrying arms. She was not intending to kill anybody. So what is democracy for Democrats? What is democracy for Americans? Going into a house of governance where the decisions are to be made for the people of US per the Constitution of US. What is the limit of democracy for the American people and for the US representatives? They did not lit up the building on fire. They did not open gunfire on everybody. They just wanted to make a point. Go inside, tell everybody, we do not like what you're doing. We think you have committed election fraud. We think this whole electoral voting is rigged and it has to be contested. It has to be questioned. It has to be challenged. And this is their way of challenging. I am not a supporter of QAnon. I'm not a supporter of Antifa. I've supported BLM, I've supported Biden's campaign, but here's what I'm trying to say, that you cannot profile people like terrorists just like that. You cannot say, oh, he's a terrorist, she's a terrorist. You cannot do that. A person should have committed terrorism. And what is terrorism? You have to define terrorism. You have to be clear about the meaning of terrorism. What the Trump protesters did at Capitol Hill is not terrorism. It is called a civil riot. A civil riot is not terrorism. It is actually an extreme form of democracy where people are so upset and flustered and frustrated, and they are like at the peak of their misery that they don't think about the consequences of what they're going to do. So they just decided to barge into the parliament to make a point that they are not happy with the election results and they're challenging it. And guess what? In a democratic country like US, 52 of them get arrested after Biden made a comment that he is the president for all Americans, including the QAnons, including the Antifa, including the BLMs, including the Hispanics, including the Muslims. But the next thing you know is when it comes to decision making, 52 of these protesters get arrested. They were dressed weirdly, they look different, they think different, yes, but it doesn't mean that you profile them as terrorists. You have to commit terrorism to be able to be called a terrorist. Did they commit terrorism? Did they commit any act of terrorism? If they did not do so, you cannot profile them as terrorists. Soros has to be removed from the DNC. This whole Soros DNC nexus that has destabilized the world, it has to be confronted. It has to be challenged so the world can be a safer place for everybody, so that finally we can see some peace in the world. There's a connection between what happened last week in Balochistan and what Soros has been conspiring. There is a connection, the killing of 11 activists in a Balochistan mine that was claimed by ISIS. We all know who's the father of ISIS. Who's the father of ISIS? You know, I know, we all know who created ISIS, who was funded by ISIS, who was proliferated by ISIS. These Blackwater like military contractors who worked for Soros, who were left to freely in the Middle East, in the Southeast Asia, to do whatever they want in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, in Libya. They, who's behind them? The Mudge killing has already been claimed by ISIS, and we know who's ISIS, who's the father of ISIS, who's behind ISIS, during whose tenures ISIS proliferated. We all know that. So that is one thing at one end of the world. This is happening to incite a division in Balochistan, to incite separation and total civil rights in Pakistan at one end of the world, by using ISIS as a tool, trying to appease Israel, trying to appease India, and at the other end, they are provoking a raid on the Capitol Hill to incriminate Donald Trump as the real bad guy in the room, who really needs to be arrested, who needs to be impeached, who needs to be you know, um, just removed from the office ASAP, as if he's the real problem. And then at the same time, we have Israel attacking Damascus and bombing Damascus with airstrikes. And we have at the same time, a war brewing in the Middle East. Israel is bombing Syria from the Golan Heights as these Trump supporters are provoked and incited to enter the Capitol Hill to challenge the elections. And this is a week after ISIS kills 11 activists, 11 coal workers in Pakistan to incite one of the worst bloody riots in Pakistan, to divide it, to destabilize it, because the plan is to attack Iran. The plan is to contain China. China has already warned its army. President Xi has already armed his army that a war is coming. So there is a global, strong, undercover, ulterior move for one of the worst wars of the history. And what happened in Capitol Hill was part of it. Removal of Trump right away is part of it. The whole COVID fiasco is part of it. The coronavirus, the vaccine, the lockdowns, UK goes on lockdown. Things are happening really fast. The idea is to control, to occupy, to limit, to arrest the civil liberties of civilians all over the world, to contain their activism, to control them, and eventually make the military-industrial complex more profitable and happier, to achieve the long-term goals in the region, which is global supremacy of Israel, at the cost of the US Marines, at the cost of the US economy, at the cost of global peace. This is what the agenda is. This is what the agenda has been. And what they're doing right now is heavily linked, because if you look at the top of the pyramid, it's just a few people, a handful of people who are controlling the strings of everything. And Soros is part of that. And he doesn't like Trump because Trump has been defying him. Trump has been defying him in trying to contain the war ambitions of the military-industrial complex of US. And I know he says a lot of things, but in terms of actions, Has he actually invaded Iran? Not as yet. Has he actually invaded China? Not as yet. Has he actually invaded North Korea? Not as yet. He's actually withdrawn a lot of forces from Afghanistan already. He's been able to mediate a peace accord with not just the North Korean president, but also with the Taliban's of Afghanistan, which is a huge achievement for any peacemaker. And but this peacemaking is not profitable for the military contractors, and so they want Trump out. They want him out. I wanted him out because of what he was doing in terms of his racism and his white supremacy and his misogyny and all that stuff that he comes up with. He's not a good president. Don't take me wrong. I am not a supporter still. But between him and Soros, if I was given a choice, I would not pick Soros. Because look at the millions of people who got destabilized and who got decimated as a result of what Soros did in the Middle East, in Syria, in Libya, in Yemen. The Yemen war is still waging on. And the biggest reason why we have peace, relative peace in Syria, is because Trump decided to have, for the first time, good relations with the Russian president. And that was actually taken as an act of treason. When it was not an act of treason, it was his effort to be able to have a peacemaking relationship with Russia, with its, with the competing countries of US. And it was a good gesture. And if it were not for the military-industrial complex and its owned mainstream media houses and its owned congressmen and women, this gesture would have been really welcomed by the rest of the world. But Soros doesn't like that. Soros does not want peace with Russia. Soros wants to continue to ignite this war and this conflict between Russia so that the entire Middle East and the Southeast Asia can be used as a proxy ground for the US-Russian wars, as has happened in Yemen and Russia and Syria. So what I'm trying to what I'm trying to tell over here is that please kindly do not be fooled by what you see, by what the mainstream media is telling you, by what even the social media is telling you. I don't know if they're going to take down this video of mine, but I'm pretty sure that Soros was behind the Capitol Hill invasion of the Trump protesters. And if you do your investigation, if you do your thorough digging, you will find clues that will confirm that Soros provoked this Capitol Hill occupation and invasion in order to incriminate Trump, in order to impeach Trump, in order to create a case to oust Trump and force him to concede. And this is exactly what has happened. And what is next for everybody? What is next for everybody is Biden, who does not stick to what he says. He said he was the president of even these Trump supporters, and the next thing we know is 52 of these Trump supporters are arrested. A woman was killed, and they are being called terrorists, and they're going to be most likely treated like terrorists. And I'm not saying that we should. I mean, we need to confront them, of course. And but like I supported the Black Lives Movement a lot, and even at its peak, I said this is not terrorism. This is civil righting, and it can happen in any corner of the world where there's democracy, where there are people who want to pursue their rights of democracy, which gives them the right of freedom of expression and speech, which gives them the right of freedom of activism. Look at what happened on the streets of Paris. People were doing rioting, they were burning the tires, they were burning even cars. But can you call them terrorists? No. These are democratic citizens of a country that says it has democracy, and they have a right to protest peacefully, But if they're frustrated enough to get volatile, which is not something that should happen, but when people get angry, they do a lot of things. And they do foolish things, yes. They can hurt people, yes. And that is not acceptable, yes. I'm a doctor, I save lives. So for me, the life of every person matters. But you cannot call them terrorists. They are not terrorists. They are democratic citizens who are trying to orchestrate their right of freedom of expression, speech, and activism. And they're upset at the election results and they're responding. And this is with their way of responding. You cannot say that they're terrorists. They are not terrorists. And you cannot keep on saying off with his head, off with her head, like you called all of the Muslim world terrorist at one point and justified your invasion into Iraq, you justified your invasion into Afghanistan, and 7 Muslim nations, Libya, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan. Pakistan got attacked too. But you can't do that anymore. When you call someone a terrorist, you have to have a clear reason. That person or that organization should have committed acts of terrorism. You cannot just say, oh, he's a terrorist, she's a terrorist. No. Where is your proof? Where is your proof? Right now, Israel is trying to wage a war, and they want to do all of this to be able to distract you. And that what is going on in the Middle East is very important right now. What they're trying to achieve is very important right now. And war is not the solution. We have to stop Israel from invading Syria. Period. No ifs and buts about it. And that should be our number one priority. And under the Biden administration, the chances of this happening under the Soros, influence are very low. So that is why they want Trump out indefinitely. They don't want a Trump influence because they want the war in Syria to be reignited. What's going to happen? Israel is going to start invading Syria. What's next? Russia is going to jump in. Iran is going to jump in. They're going to create their next proxy ground, Syria, again, after we barely got peace in Syria. So what they want to do is they want to rewind you back to the ages when Syria was invaded, when the civil crisis was aggravated by the Obama administration using its CIA influence. And they want to take you back, rewind the years back to what Obama and Biden did in Syria all those years. That when Trump came in, he had a peace accord with Putin that he put an end to. So they want that time to come back. They want Syria to be invaded, occupied by Israel and coalition forces right now. And Biden is the key that's going to help them in reigniting the flames of the military-industrial complex that has been very profitable for them at the cost of the US economy, at the cost of the US Marines, at the cost of little boys, lives of little boys like Alyan. That's all I have to say. Bye-bye.